start brewery. 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us at tonight's webinar relating to Kuwait and Kuwait's citizenship stripping campaign that's been taking place between 2024 and 2025. We're entitling this event, we're calling on Kuwait to end its harmful citizenship stripping program. Tonight, we're joined by a number of experts and commentators and activists on this issue. They include, in the order of appearance, Andrew McIntosh will be starting us off. He's the Director of Research at Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, followed by Wafa from the Northern Arabia Surviving Indigeneity Organization, who will be off camera for reasons of security. She'll be followed by Michael Khambata, who's the Geneva representative of the Gulf Center for Human Rights. Fala Sayed, a human rights officer at MENA Rights Group. Then Joanna Kuzmova, the acting director of Hawiyati, or the MENA Statelessness Network. Then Christy Chitengu of the Global Movement Against Statelessness, GMAS. And finally, but certainly not least, Tiana Xavier from ISI, the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion. Just before we get it going, just to say that this citizenship stripping program that the government of Kuwait has embarked upon has had up to hundreds of thousands of people impacted. All of our organizations have taken action in one way or another on this issue, and we've decided to come together in the preparation of a report, which we're kind of informally launching tonight. It will actually formally go live probably next week. We're using tonight's occasion of World Children's Day, because it's children at the heart of this, women and children at the heart of this issue. We're choosing this night to kind of have a pre-launch of the event. So it's impacted on a lot of people. We're going to get going and start off with Andrew, Salam for Democracy and Human Rights. Andrew, could you tell us a little bit about what this report is about? What does it cover? Who's impacted? And just give us a summary of that sort of issue in about 3 or 4 minutes, if you could.
Certainly, Drew. I mean, what we've been covering particularly is that since September 2024, following the ascension of Sheikh Mashal Al-Ahmed Al-Jabr Al-Sabah to the position of emir, the Kuwaiti government has been undertaking an unprecedented campaign of mass citizenship revocation. As of August 2025, more than 50,000 of their nationality. Since September 2025, however, the government has ceased announcing revocations, meaning that the real number is likely far higher, as high as 200,000, although we cannot tabulate that for sure. They've also seen major spikes in small periods of time. In the autumn of 2024, nearly 4,300 individuals were stripped of their citizenship within 3 weeks, and over 1,600 people had their citizenship removed in a single day. This means that Kuwaitis cannot attain state employment, they can't attend public schools, they can't access free state healthcare, or receive their pensions. They can no longer own property or land in Kuwait. Individuals have reported that their driving licenses have been suspended and that access to their Kuwaiti bank accounts has been restricted. Because dual nationality is illegal in Kuwait, these actions have made them stateless. They are unable to leave Kuwait in most cases due to their passports being canceled as well, effectively making them prisoners in the very country that has disowned them. Now, while Kuwaiti authorities cite fraud and national security as justification for the campaign, our report shows that it has been deliberately politicized and weaponized to silence dissent, punish critical voices in the country, and weaken civil society. Activists have been targeted, with several individuals having their citizenship revoked for voicing concern and criticisms of the government. Moreover, the campaign is gendered and racialized. It has disproportionately targeted citizens naturalized under Article 8 and minority groups naturalized under Articles 5 and 6 of Kuwait's nationality law. Women have been labeled as cheats and gold diggers by pro-government media, and the emir described the campaign as a national effort to restore Kuwait to its rightful people, clean and free of impurities. This was made possible by the consolidation of power under the emir. In May 2024, he suspended parliament and key articles of the Kuwaiti constitution for up to 4 years. With Kuwait's only democratic institution now inactive, the emir is the sole arbiter of power in the country. and the first mass citizen revocations coincided with this. Decree 116/2024, issued in December 2023, amended Articles 7, 8 of the nationality law and suspended Article 9 of the Kuwaiti nationality law. This means that it removed the option of marrying Kuwaiti men as the pathway to acquiring Kuwaiti citizenship. These changes worsen gender discrimination in the nationality law, where Kuwaiti women do not have the right to transmit their nationality to their children. It also excludes foreign women from becoming Kuwaiti nationals and places their children at high risk of being born stateless or becoming stateless. And the removal of Article 9 strips foreign women of protection from losing their nationality after divorce or widowhood. These amendments are being enforced retroactively, meaning that tens of thousands of individuals have had their citizenship removed by no fault of their own. These policies are in breach of Kuwait's international treaty obligations, notably the ICCPR, the CERD, CEDAW, the CRC, and the Human Rights Council. The human cost of this is immense. People have been left in a state of limbo, causing catastrophic financial, social, and psychological harm. Those affected face a bleak existence for due process, being at least temporarily locked out of their bank accounts and forced to relinquish home ownership. They are often bankrupted by this experience. Their social and economic vulnerability within Kuwait has enabled exploitation from their employers and other citizens, aware that they have no rights and are now considered outsiders, while state officials have been recorded arresting, humiliating, and deporting women who discuss their plight on social media. From our experience doing this report, numerous individuals interviewed expressed despair and desperation at their situation, believing that there is no help coming and that their lives are effectively over because of this decision. And it's for that reason that this report has been made to amplify those very voices so that the international community will take action. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. Thanks, Andrew. A very quick follow-up. One or two of the recommendations of the report. What are the organizations generally? What are some of the key? Just one or two of the key recommendations, and please speak slowly for the interpretation.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the main things that we have been looking at is to basically see that the main issues of the National Assembly as that it be reinstated, that democracy essentially be allowed to return, and that elections are held as soon as possible. We also want to address and remedy systematic gaps created by the revocation of Article 9 in the Kuwaiti nationality law, which protects women who are married to male Kuwaiti citizens from denaturalization, and building on that, removing discriminatory provisions within citizenship transmission in Kuwaiti law because it is patrilineal, effectively working to prevent anything like this from happening again.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much. Next, we're going to turn to Wafa from the Northern Arabia Surviving Indigeneity Organization. She will be off camera for reasons of security. The organization, NASI, was key in collating a number of the cases that are in the report, up to about 30 plus, that will be figured in that. So, Wafa, I just wanted to ask you, what were the challenges in gathering these case studies? From what we gathered from what Andrew's just said, and by the fact that your camera is off, there's a security context here. So could you tell us just a little bit about those security concerns that you may have had in gathering the case information, the case studies that you've provided to this text?
Oh, hello, Drury, and hello, everyone. And thank you for moderating this event. So due to limit time, I will mention headlines of the key challenges. So I believe the challenges details are covered in the report in general. Regarding the safety, which is one of the key challenges, as a bidun stateless Kuwaiti woman, there is a risk of public visibility. Even while I am in the UK, there are still risks to me, to myself and my family, if I express my concern and the concerns of the thousands of affected women. That's why the camera is off. Also, about the safety challenges, which is online safety. most of the women lacked awareness and even skills to communicate securely. So we made sure that they use anonymous emails and not to share personal details. And also they delete, we recommended that for them, they delete chat log after sharing their stories, because we're afraid from hacking or others like scams or something like that, for their safety. So also there's a challenges about well-being. The emotional and psychological was a hard part we dealt with. The women were traumatized and they crying while they were telling their stories. And this was very tough thing and sensitive on both of us. So we also have a question of trust. This is also as a challenge. Some women were afraid and hesitate to connect with a Nasi team, as we unknown to them. So they spoke or reached Ahmed because they know his profile, and that made them confident to share with us their story. So I can't tell you how hard this was. Also, we have other issues as translation and technology. As you know, more details are covered in the reports, as I mentioned. So we need more solidarity with affected women because their situation has become even more dire. They are under threat of the prisons if they don't pay their loan. Also, at the same time, they lost their income, or their income reduced significantly. And as you know, they lost their jobs and their pensions, and they have travel restrictions and other stuff. So this is the main issues that, or challenges that we dealt with in the report.
That's great. Thanks so much, Wafa. Yeah, a catalog of challenges there.
Yeah.
Look, I want to move on to what are possible, what we can possibly do about it, how we can possibly help, and for that I'm going to turn to Michael Khambata of the Gulf Center for Human Rights, the Geneva representative. It's an organization that engages with human rights defenders and activists and so on. Michael, we've heard from Wafa and Nasi, women have lost their jobs. There's a question of traumatization. Andrew talked about a kind of broadly repressive atmosphere. It's difficult. It's challenging. What can regional and international human rights defenders and activists kind of do in this context? Is there any way to impact the government of Kuwait?
I think there is, and I'm otherwise I wouldn't be doing this job. Some of it might take a little bit longer than we hope. There are no instantly quick fixes. But before I start, first of all, I'd like to thank Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, and I'd like to thank the Rights Realization Center for the invitation and everybody who was involved in the report. It's an honor to sit on this panel and be part of this discussion. And I think one of the things that has already been done is creating this report. It's an extraordinarily powerful reference tool. I mean, the legal analysis is the kind of thing that I think states are happy to receive. It's something that's in depth. It might need a summary document at some point, or an executive a summary to make it a little bit more user friendly for some diplomats. But it's the kind of thing that I would be happy to share in Geneva and to prompt discussion. If you think about regional and international NGOs, I mean, we don't have a footprint on the ground necessarily. And so one of the things what we do is we partnership. We do partnerships with local organizations or local individuals, and we do it in two ways. I think if local partners feel safe enough to advocate publicly, we try and open the doors based upon the access that we have. So, for example, I do this in Geneva with human rights mechanisms. I do it with missions. I do it with the Human Rights Council, which is, of course, one of the mechanisms. And if I can, I sort of put the local partners forward, either as individuals or as organizations. In cases here, for example, where we're speaking about Wafa, where it's too dangerous for those locally, we'll speak on their behalf. So, and we'll be very clear about the fact that we're speaking on their behalf. I'm safe. Frankly, I don't have personal connections in the Arab world, so I'm able to say what I want. And I know that's a luxury that frankly not all my colleagues even in Geneva have. But I will speak on their behalf if I can. I also say that we gather our own information and we speak from our own conclusions as well. So I think the most important thing is to do professional level documentation that is credible, that is well researched, and argues the case well. And I think this report is fantastic. We have our own reports, but I'm happy to use other people's reports, and I'm happy to use any good documentation. And I hope when we produce good documentation that others are happy to do it as well. When we're engaging with states, frankly, they don't care who authored it. They care about whether it's a good document or not. And this certainly falls in that category. And I think it's important to talk about documentation, because if we don't document, we have nothing to work with. Reports like this are put this awful situation in the public eye. I haven't seen anything in the New York Times about this. I don't know who's reporting on it. I bet if we go to Google News, there's not a lot about it. And it's happened really quickly, and it's devastating. And I don't even see the logic in it. I mean, there's a logic somehow if you're going to attack people, dissenters, or human rights defenders. It's wrong, but I can see why they're doing it. But just to attack tens of thousands of families who are probably not making any trouble. You're stirring up trouble. You're stirring up dissent within your population for reasons I can't really understand. But anyway, that's another story. I'll just perhaps give you an example of some of the things that we've done to show what we can do. So there was the UPR adoption at the Human Rights Council's 60th session, which was in September. Now, this was before we saw the scope and depth of this, but the stress on our statement, which is 90 seconds, just so that we know what we're talking about, was on the Badoon community, who are still the 90,000 plus stateless that we know of, and there was one recommendation at least talking about this revocation of nationality. No one really understood the scope yet. Now, this happens every 4.5 years. There are tons of other opportunities. Outside Geneva, the EU have a human rights dialogue with Kuwait. We provided inputs on the last one. We've done a report of our own in February 2025 where we looked at this issue, and that was based upon a visit there, which we carried out, and we didn't put anyone there in danger. In July, we reported on Mohammed al-Barghesh's sentence of 3 years for tweeting on this matter, asking authorities to engage on. Actually, he was engaging on the Badoon, not on the revocation. So, what does all this serve? Well, we've actually already seen the government has had to react because they've made such a mess that they didn't mean to. So now you have this identity to be treated as a Kuwaiti. Which you've documented in the report, Andrew, which is great. Already it's not necessarily our pressure, but we add to the pressure as all of a sudden they realize they created an unworkable situation. And I think it's our job to keep piling on and do as much as we can and be as loud as we can, and continue doing that. And hopefully there's a breakthrough. And if not, we've documented the issue. So I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks very much. We're going to turn now to what the Kuwaiti authorities have actually been doing. What are the measures that have changed in order to make people's lives worse? Falah Syed from the MENA Rights Group has looked at some of this, has worked a lot on the legal side of things. Falah, what are some of the legal measures that the government has put in place? But more importantly, what has been the impact, or some of the impacts that you've discerned as a result of these legal measures on women and on children?
Thank you so much, Drury, and thank you so much for the other panelists. I will try to be as brief as possible. Of course, I mean, the human cost of this citizenship revocation campaign is really profound and far-reaching. And we've seen, many organizations have documented that women discover, their statelessness in really shocking ways, through either blocked bank accounts, frozen assets, or just the inability to access basic services. So basically, everything is stopped from one day to the other. These women also who, have renounced their own nationalities when they married a Kuwaiti, because this is required by Kuwaiti law, now they find themselves in a sort of a legal limbo without any nationality whatsoever. And the thing is that placing them in that situation means that they cannot travel, they cannot work legally, they cannot access healthcare, or in some cases, they cannot even see their own children, actually. And the impact on children is as well quite catastrophic because, under Kuwait's patrilineal nationality law, children ordinarily derive citizenship from their fathers. However, when, mothers lose their citizenships, families, are somehow torn apart. Women stripped of nationality cannot obtain custody or visitation rights without legal documentation. So children also will face, barriers to education, healthcare, and employment, and kind of inherit their mother's, precarious legal status and vulnerability. I mean, the vulnerability of statelessness, and this goes across generations. And the amendments of the Kuwaiti nationality law actually have, retroactively invalidated naturalizations, which previously allowed foreign women married to Kuwaiti men to acquire citizenship. And basically, the implementation of these measures has been carried out by this Supreme Committee called the Kuwait Supreme Committee to investigate Kuwaiti citizenship, which is a governmental body chaired by I can't remember the name anymore. Sorry. But the committee's decisions are basically not subject to judicial oversight or appeal, and they are merely brought for approval before the cabinet. And these measures, occurred in kind of a broader context, and I think it's important to say it, of escalating, political repression. In May 2024, the emir dissolved the elected parliament, a dissolution that could last up to 4 years, along with the suspension of certain constitutional provisions. And this clearly has, created a legal vacuum when it comes to, this whole issue of citizenship stripping, where there is clearly no meaningful checks on executive power, putting those who have been impacted at an increased risk. I would like to, I don't know if I have some time, Drury, to speak a bit quickly about the, international obligations of Kuwait, or...
1 minute, 1 minute.
Okay. It's going to be a bit hard, but I just wanted to say that there is, a customary international law obligation to prevent statelessness, which means that Kuwait has to comply with this obligation. And the fact that, the extension of citizenship revocations to family members, wives and children, actually violates this fundamental principle. And the fundamental also principle that, deprivation of nationality must be strictly individualized. And this also has and as was recognized in the Convention on the Rights of Children, which Kuwait ratified, children have the right to preserve their identity, including nationality. And yet we see that Kuwaiti authorities stripped entire families of citizenship based solely on one person's status, punishing children who have committed no act prejudicial to the state.
Thank you very much. You finished, yeah? I mean, I think that's. I'm gonna jump in, but before that, let me just remind people that this is being broadcast live on YouTube and on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, in Arabic and in English. Fala, the thing that you touched on that continues to rankle with me probably the most is the retroactive application of the change of legislation. So hundreds, if not thousands of women who followed the law in years gone by renouncing their citizenship, British, French, Lebanese, Gulf, whatever, loads, were then in this position that impacted on their own states. They had to go back. I mean, we Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, we engaged with the FCDO in London, and we were meeting with the Gulf team at the FCDO, and it was when they had revoked the citizenship of 2 British women, and the British authorities said, well, we're extending consular services. We said, why are you extending consular services? They're not British. And he said, what can we do? The Kuwaitis have forced us to do this. This is the position that we're in. Anyhow, look, there's a lot of statelessness in the region, and that's where I'd like to go next, briefly. Hawiyati, the MENA Statelessness Network, does a lot of work throughout the region, in Syria, Gulf, across Northern Africa, and so on. Ioana Kuzmova is the acting director. Ioana, you're familiar with what Kuwait has been doing, but you also hear and see what's been happening in Syria. You're aware of others. How does Kuwait kind of compare in this, or is it even fair to make such comparisons? Is there a bad, or is there a better, is there a worse? What's the situation of statelessness in the region? And we can't hear you, or at least I can't. I still cannot. What we might do is
maybe logging off and logging in again.
Yeah, maybe try that. While Ioana sorts that out in respect, we'll leave that question to one side, and we'll go to Christy Chitengu to bring you up. I hope that's all right, Christy. Christy leads, or co-leads perhaps, the global movement against statelessness. So it's a community of stateless actors in the world, and I guess what we've seen in recent years is the stateless community globally becoming more active, and I was kind of wondering if it was as a result of the decade-long I Belong campaign, the 2014-2024 campaign by UNHCR. But in relation to this issue, Christy, can other stateless activists in other parts of the world, can they engage in this? And if so, how?
Thank you, Drury, for that question. Before I begin, I wanted to ground my answer in the lived experience and reality of someone directly affected. The movement, I think it was quite strange. It coincided with our participation in the webinar, and we received a message on one of our social media platforms asked by an impacted woman from Kuwait, asking us to show, to do a little more on the situation in Kuwait. And she shared a message with us, and because she cannot appear safely or publicly, she still chose to reach out and trusted that her words would be carried forward with us. And so I just wanted to directly quote something, an excerpt of what she did share with us, which was, a stateless person has to sign many papers before accessing any rights. These papers include personal information such as a name, date, and place of birth and occupation, as well as acknowledgement of the country of origin mentioned on the paper. A stateless person cannot request to change this information, including their country of origin, on these papers. And if they refuse to sign a paper listing a country of origin that is different from the Kuwaiti one, they cannot access any rights. Many stateless women believe the system forces them to sign away their Kuwaiti citizenship. And this is what she shared with us. This testimony not only shows the administrative hurdles that this report by Salam explores, but it's an alarm bell. It's a human alarm bell. It reveals how documentation, or the lack thereof, is used as a tool of coercion and erasure. And it also explains why so many people in Kuwait cannot risk public participation. They cannot advocate openly, and often cannot even be seen speaking to even the global movement against statelessness. And their survival often depends on their invisibility. And yet, these groups still organize quietly. They still reach out to us. They still ask for solidarity. And that alone tells us that we urgently need to rethink what inclusion looks like, what support looks like, and what solidarity from those who can speak and those who do have the privilege to speak publicly on these issues says. Around the world, like you said, Drury, following the I Belong campaign, and I think also following the World Conference Against Statelessness, there was a need to have stateless people lead, and for their voices to not just be symbolic, but to actually be the ones driving the agenda, driving the change, and informing what that looks like. And through that, we've seen the development of many, many stateless-led organizations, some of whom are represented here and who are members to the global movement against statelessness. And so this infrastructure, leadership infrastructure, advocacy infrastructure that's been driven by impacted people definitely came from that conference and the I Belong campaign. And I think that's just a show of what solidarity in action could look like for Kuwaiti activists who cannot speak, leveraging on these other stateless-led organizations that have shown and proven that activism and visibility has been able to get their laws changed, or visibility to their causes. I think in that regard, Kuwaiti activists or stateless people can rely on those existing organizations to amplify and to reinforce things like this report or any other efforts. And so I think it's important when we do speak about solidarity for communities in Kuwait that we are aware that symbolic statements are not enough, and recognize that our own visibility as stateless people is a privilege, and be mindful of how we can extend that to those who cannot publicly participate. Thank you, Drury.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, it remains a challenge, but as you say, I think the fact that Wafa I was able to take part, and indeed I hope we'll be able to come to other impacted people, either from the old Badoon community, the pre-existing community, or indeed those who've been impacted in recent days. Look, we're going to try to come back to Joanna now. Joanna, I was asking about the kind of regional comparison, if such a comparison is actually possible or even doable. What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you so much, Drury. First of all, I apologize for the audio issue earlier. We're incredibly glad to be part of this conversation and to testify to what Kuwaiti perceives as a crime of massive and arbitrary nationality stripping that we're witnessing in Kuwait. Both women's basic human rights and children's universal rights to access nationality are compromised across the Arabian Peninsula, and those compromises are written into basic law. This happens to a different extent. But I will note that while women citizens cannot freely transmit their nationality on an equal basis as male citizens to their children with non-citizens in all GCC countries, measures have been taken to acknowledge the reality of children of women citizens and to expand rights to them to some extent. Unfortunately, the positive measures have been far more limited and symbolic and offered solely at the discretion of the state. At the same time, we have seen near universal move toward making it harder for Gulf state citizens to transmit their nationality to their spouses, both wives and husbands, in the last 10 years. And here I'm speaking to changes in the laws in the United Arab Emirates and very recently in Oman. So as examples, I'll note that in the UAE, children of women citizens with non-citizens or stateless fathers are substantially allowed to benefit from the same rights as Emirati children until they turn 18. However, once they turn 18, where they're allowed to apply for nationality, the status of this nationality application is unclear. Is it a naturalization or a nationality acquisition by operation of law application? It is highly unregulated. There is no statutory requirement to promptly process or such applications. So this creates profoundly unequal starting points for the children of one Emirati parent, depending on the parent's gender, right? In Saudi Arabia, a decree in 2023 clarified the procedure for naturalization of the children of women citizens with non-citizens. But of course, this is far short from correcting the underlying inequality in treatment between men and women. For an amendment in February 2025 that I was just referencing, Omani nationality law now makes it far more difficult for Omani mothers to pass their citizenship to their children, restricting it only to widows and divorcees. So those are trends that we see, but it is key to emphasize that the type of retroactive rights eroding and arbitrary shift in policy that Kuwait has undertaken in the past year and a half has no clear analogs. And we sincerely hope that it will remain this way. In the broader region, you're right to note in your previous comments, Drury, that the biggest and most long-standing stateless population are Palestinians. Their rights, regardless of where they reside, the so-called occupied territories, neighboring countries, or in the broader MENA region, are unsettled. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here to get into this. But the end, just to highlight finally one thing you mentioned about Syria, the end of the Assad regime signals an opening for reducing statelessness there. And there has been, since December of last year, mobilization to push for amendments to the Syrian nationality law that go exactly in the opposite direction of what we have been seeing in some parts of the Gulf, through a campaign called My Nationality is Their Right, led by Syrian women who demand full equality between men and women in terms of nationality rights. And they demand that this equality be embedded in the basic law that is being elaborated right now. The change can be incredibly surgical or technical or small, and it can be placed across the levels of legislation, including the work of the newly launched Constitutional Committee. And this would indeed be a very meaningful step forward. And we at Hawaii believe that it will empower grassroots movements across the region. So I will leave us on that note.
Slight bit of optimism, but the one thing that did come out pretty clearly in what you had to say about other countries in the Gulf, and indeed what all the participants have been saying about Kuwait, is really coming back to the extreme vulnerability of women in particular over and over again. And indeed, what's been happening in Kuwait really shows that. Tiana Xavier is a lead advocacy lead at the Institute on Statelessness and inclusion. And I guess, Tiana, that's the question I'd like to turn to you about. There's so many challenges here. Women are at risk in so many ways. Is there any scope for advocacy? I mean, Kuwait is a member of the UN's Human Rights Council, and they're supposed to be, these paragons of upholding the highest standards of human rights and so on and so forth. But what we've been hearing is not great. So what are the advocacy options?
Thanks, Drury. So yeah, let's dive right into what the international advocacy landscape looks like. But to answer this, I think it's first important to understand Kuwait's relation to international advocacy. Does this really even matter to them? So in the report that's going to be launched in Kuwait, you see that the emir really wields extensive power right now. But despite wielding this extensive power and the concentration of authority, Kuwait is still very conscious of its international image and its international reputation. You can see this because Kuwait consistently engages with UN human rights bodies. They regularly submit reports. They send high-level delegations still. They publicly emphasize their cooperation with international mechanisms. And when an NGO reports on their violations, they publicly engage on rebutting these criticisms. They sit, right, like you said, they sit on the membership of the Human Rights Council. And they also actually recently invited the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women to Kuwait for a country visit in September this year. So Kuwait really cares about positioning themselves as a moderate, reliable, stable, internationally cooperative state. They care about international advocacy. So what sort of mechanisms and which actors actually have the power to influence Kuwait's policies? The UN has several mechanisms, and the most prominent being the Universal Periodic Review, like Michael already mentioned. There's treaty bodies, there's special rapporteurs. So starting with the Universal Periodic Review, Kuwait just had its review this year, and they received quite a few strong recommendations on the issue. It remains to be seen, are they going to accept it? Are they going to reject it? But if they do accept certain recommendations, the role of international advocacy there for international NGOs and local NGOs is to turn to how can we push for the implementation of these recommendations? How can we push to monitor Kuwait's progress on it? With treaty bodies, you've got, as Michael also mentioned and other colleagues on this call, you've got the CRC, you've got CEDAW, you've got CERD. And Kuwait was already reviewed recently by many of these bodies. And what Kuwait's committee is doing now is in the midst of preparing reports for these treaty bodies on its progress and how it's implementing. So it's important to keep an eye on that also and to provide an actual alternative view by NGOs on what is the actual practices on the ground. With special rapporteurs, what's really important is the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, given the impact that this has had, the citizenship stripping has had on women. So, like I mentioned earlier, the Special Rapporteur had just visited Kuwait in September. They're going to present the full report to the Human Rights Council in June next year. So it's also important to engage with the Special Rapporteur on this, have a dialogue with her, have constant dialogue with her, and this could be an entry point into influencing the agenda next year of the Human Rights Council. And there's other special rapporteurs to engage with also. You've got Special Rapporteur on racism, counterterrorism, minority issues. So that's one entry point. And now turning to government allies, like Michael also touched upon, it's the importance of engaging with states on this. So Kuwait's last UPR review earlier in May this year, they received strong questions by the UK and by Belgium on whether it would consider suspending their revocations, whether they're taking any steps to make sure that people are not being made stateless in this campaign period. So they're really strong allies to engage with, the UK and Belgium. Other strategic allies are France, the Netherlands, Czech Republic. These are all countries that made strong UPR recommendations, and they also sit with Kuwait on the Human Rights Council this year as its members. So they have, again, the potential to influence the agenda at the Human Rights Council next year. So these are key targets, target missions to engage with. And also we're seeing similar issues, quite frankly, in a number of countries on revocations. Countries are increasingly using citizenship as a political tool to silence dissent, to create a group of who they believe actually just deserves nationality. There's a group who deserves it, there's a group who doesn't deserve it. So engaging across the board with other actors in different countries where this is also an issue, like with Nicaragua, Cambodia, Egypt, Dominican Republic, building solidarity with other key actors, and then to perhaps propose a side event on this issue at the Human Rights Council next year in March or in June would be a strong international advocacy input. So this is an issue that concerns many. It's not just Kuwait, and there's strength in coming together on that.
That's great. Some great ideas, and I hope all our, or at least a number of our organizations can come together. I didn't even think about Belgium, for example. Certainly a side event that I can see us, taking action towards. Look, it's difficult in this context. Thank you, Tiana. It's difficult in this context to try and get directly impacted people's voices in the mix for this, because there's a lot of fear and an apprehension about it. Just a reminder that there is a translation element on that we have in the Zoom, and there is an Arabic feed and an English feed. Right now, I just want to go to somebody from the old, for want of a better term, Bedouin community, a special guest, Ahmed bin Swait, who's a Kuwaiti researcher, a stateless Kuwaiti. Just for any thoughts, Ahmed, that you might have, as you seem to be standing out somewhere in the streets of the UK somewhere. Do you have any thoughts about what you've been hearing us discuss?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Drury. I'm indeed at UCL. I took break from my class to attend this webinar. First thing, I think the situation with arbitrary deprivation of nationality in Kuwait is no longer it's no longer suitable to use painkillers. It has gone too far. I mean, if we look at what is happening in practice and from almost daily interaction with affected people, I will focus maybe on the situation of Article 8 women, because this is a specific category, which is a significant number of people, around 40,000 women, which constitutes systematic gender-based mass revocation of nationality leading to statelessness. In the shadow of this situation, the government of Kuwait is forcing women to acquire a foreign nationality. So let us not forget that the women who got Kuwaiti nationality since up to 40 years ago, they had to renounce, according to Kuwait nationality law, they had to renounce their so-called original nationality. What is happening now, the government is depriving the women from their fundamental rights and forcing them to acquire nationalities that are now foreign to them. So we are, even I had a conversation with some legal kind of experts. I'm not trained in law, which they think it's oppression. It's pure oppression, because no government, I think it's a unique situation where a country forcing someone to acquire another country's nationality, because effectively the women who lost their Kuwaiti nationality now, they are stateless. They live as stateless people, and the government is giving them short deadlines, after which today itself I spoke to a woman who was crying. She was very much embarrassed. She went to buy some groceries, and then she realized that her bank account wouldn't work. And she had many bank cards. She tried one, second, third, fourth, no one is working. And she was crying and embarrassed. And she had to contact some of her relatives to come and pay for grocery for her. What the government is doing, trying to make their lives very difficult, pressing them in every aspect of their lives. And today also I heard from one affected woman that the government is going after their Kuwaiti children. So one woman, her children are Kuwaiti, they are studying, they are going to the college, asking the son to bring evidence of his mother's nationality. So if the mother doesn't provide, doesn't accept to go and acquire a foreign nationality, they will kind of harass him or stop his scholarship or whatever. So I think we are in front of a very kind of precarious situation. Thousands and thousands of people who are effectively stateless now. And in terms of solidarity, maybe you know, Yuri and others, I think what I am personally doing, I'm working on a submission to kind of trigger, like I am tackling this situation as a crime. I'm not speaking as a violation of human rights. This is the problem, I think. We are talking about violations of human rights, whereas the reality is this can constitute a crime according to Rome Statute Article 8. You know, there are grounds for there is an argument, there is a basis for an argument that this is a crime. This is no longer a restriction or violation. Yeah, and I hope there will be more solidarity, more kind of collective action in this respect.
Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks for taking time out from your class as well to come along. Yeah, we touch on the aspect of it being a crime, and I think it's something that we need to kind of advance a little bit with the thinking of maybe some of those that Tiana referred to, or indeed some of the expertise and the contacts that people like Fala in Geneva have. I see a kind of an emerging discourse from at least one academic, for example, in Oxford, about how the deprivation of citizenship, mass deprivation of citizenship, and what it entails can be a crime. Look, I'm not aware of any questions coming through, and it's difficult for others to contribute really from Kuwait. I see no question. I'm not aware of any questions either on the feed of X or on YouTube. I may give it another minute. Would anyone like to have any other thoughts about the problem, or indeed working towards solution, if indeed there ever will be one, as we wait for any possible comments from outside our group to come in? Any thoughts that anyone might have? Yeah, I thought that might be the case. It's difficult. The report will be launched, hard launched, so to speak, next week. Once we get all the pieces lined up, covers and all the final bits and bobs, and I'm sure we'll make all the participating organizations aware. And we'll have to pick this up in the new year. I expect to with some advocacy using the mechanisms that we've been discussing. For now, though, I think it's time to thank you all for taking part, and indeed for all those who have been watching, whether on X or on YouTube. And as I said before, it can be watched on catch up on the YouTube channel of Salam, or via X. So thank you all for taking part, and we'll speak to you all very soon. Thanks and good evening.
Thank you so much, Drury.
Yes, thank you so much, Drury. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.